Thanks for joining me on Just Cook with Michael. Today, after watching this video, you'll know how to make the traditional donut from the island of Madeira, Portugal, and the Azores. We're going to make malasada. It's going to have active yeast, water, which is going to be warm between 105 and 115. That's to rehydrate our yeast. That's very important. I'm going to use thermometers, which again, if you haven't got these, I highly recommend these digital thermometers. Easy to read, super accurate. When rehydrating yeast, it's important to be in that range because too cold, it's not going to want to come back to life. If it's over like 135, 140, you're going to kill your yeast. Sometimes having the right tools is the only way to go. We're going to have some all-purpose bread flour, sugar, evaporated milk, vanilla, eggs, 5 eggs, some salt, some lemon juice for acidity, and some nutmeg. I'm going to use fresh nutmeg. You could also use ground up nutmeg, and then some oil to fry the malasada. The first thing you need to do is rehydrate your yeast. So I have a 1/4 cup of warm water. This is at 108. It should be between 105 and 115 in that range. I put in a pinch of sugar. This is to give it the yeast something to feed upon. I'm only putting in probably about an 1/8 teaspoon of sugar. You just need a tiny bit in there just to get it started. Swirl that around. Pour in your yeast. Give that a little swirl. So within about 10 minutes, you should see your yeast beginning to bubble and froth. That means they're alive and starting to replicate. We'll set this aside while we mix our other ingredients. If you don't have evaporated milk, you can substitute half and half, or if you have some heavy cream, you can dilute the heavy cream by maybe 50% and use that instead. The purpose for the lemon juice in this recipe is actually to lower the pH of the dough mixture. Straight out of the King Arthur website, the degree of acidity expressed as pH also has an effect on fermentation. Hard water is more alkaline than soft water and can decrease the activity of yeast. Water that is slightly acid at pH below 7 is preferred for baking. So you can use white wine vinegar too. You won't taste it in there, it's so little, but it does help decrease the pH. Next, I'm going to put in evaporated milk. Traditionally, this donut was made before Lent. It was almost like clearing the cupboards of your sugar and your fat, your butter, all that. I have a 1/2 cup of butter, 4 ounces. It's been melted. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and the recipe calls for 5 eggs. The Malasadas Donuts are very popular in Hawaii also because the immigrants from the Azores and Madeira were specialized in sugarcane, and hundreds of years ago they went over to Hawaii to help them process sugar and brought along these donuts with them. So in Hawaii, Fat Tuesday, the day before Lent, is Malasada Day. So very popular dish there. You can see that yeast is very active. It's foamed up like a nice head on a beer there. But now I'm going to put in my acidity. I'm going to put in 1.5 teaspoons of lemon juice. You could also use white wine vinegar. This is just to lower the pH of the overall dough. If you use distilled or white wine vinegar, you're not going to taste it in there. So 1/2 cup of sugar. The word malasada actually means, the prefix mal means bad and asada is cooked. So it's like poorly cooked. And that's because of the almost underdone texture in the interior. One thing that makes this different from most donuts is the amount of eggs. There's a little more than an egg per cup of flour. Gives it a unique flavor. I'll grate my 2 teaspoons of nutmeg. Now I'll mix in my 2 teaspoons of freshly ground nutmeg. Smells incredible. Next, I'll pour in the rehydrated yeast. Also, this dish, almost used interchangeably, is called filhos, which means fritters in Portugal. Usually on the mainland of Portugal, you'll hear it referred to as filhos, and on the islands, malasada. And now I'm going to put in 4 cups of bleached bread flour. Bread flour is slightly higher in gluten, but one thing, this recipe has a lot of egg and egg yolk, and gluten in bread flour helps the malasadas retain their structure. 4. Now I'm going to put in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Salt, obviously important in flavor, and also salt definitely has a beneficial effect on gluten, and it keeps yeast at check. Without salt, yeast would grow very rapidly, so it's a check on yeast, but it helps gluten development. Salt in there. All the ingredients are in the bowl. Now we're just gonna mix them up. You can do this in a KitchenAid mixer. I really believe the less experience you have with baking breads or making donuts, it's just good to do it by hand to get a feel for the dough. It's going to help you in the future when you make other breads or doughs, just to see like, okay, the tackiness, how much water absorption happens, you know, after a few minutes, after an hour, the feel of the dough after while you're first mixing it compared to, you know, 5 minutes later. There's just nothing like, you know, you learn by all those tactile sensations. That smells so good. The vanilla and the nutmeg in there, it's already just like wafting up into my nasal passages. If you like these recipes and want to see more, please subscribe and hit the like button. I have my dough scraper. These little rounded shaped scrapers are great for getting everything off the sides. You don't really need to knead it too much. Remember, anytime water comes in contact with flour, the two proteins in flour, gliadin and gliadidine, are going to combine and begin to form gluten. So just, it needs water. In the presence of water and time, you're already going to get gluten development. And because this is a donut, you don't have to have you don't have to knead it a ton. Okay, our dough looks really good, just to kind of give you an idea of the consistency there. Our dough is combined. Now, let time do its thing. It's going to take about an hour to 2 hours for it to double in size. Again, this is something you could make up to this point the night before and put in your refrigerator. And then the next morning, just bring it up to temperature, which would probably take about an hour, then let it rise for about another hour, just quicker than doing it all in one day. All right, my dough has been proofing for about an hour and a half. I'm gonna shape these, then, to me it's not quite double in size, but I'm gonna shape these, put them on a cookie sheet pan. I'm gonna leave the house for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, come back and they'll be ready to go. So, again, don't be a slave to the time, but it's definitely best to let these proof. Don't be in a hurry to let them proof, but I think they could go overproof them a little bit, then underproof them so they're nice and airy. I'll flour my surface here, and in Portugal and Madeira and the mainland, a lot of times they're either shaped like a fritter, like you would see an apple fritter, or almost like a free form where they'll just grab a clump and put it right into the hot oil. In Hawaii, they're almost always shaped just in little rounds, not with holes in the middle, but just like little round biscuits. So first I'm gonna get out a piece and shape them the way they do more in Hawaii. I'm also going to reserve some of this dough. I like to experiment every once in a while. This is kind of similar to a real yeast Belgian waffle, the kind you actually get in Belgium, not like in America. They're usually made with baking soda, which is the chemical leavening agent, but in Belgium it's made with yeast. So I'm going to reserve a little bit of this and try it out as a Belgian waffle and just see how they turn out. Feels nice and pillowy. It was still very tacky to the touch until I started rolling it in this flour a little bit, and now it just feels really pillowy soft. You can see that's the stretch on it. Not a ton of gluten development, but that's okay for this type of pastry. I could smell the vanilla and fresh nutmeg, and it's just, can't wait to try these. I have these little cookie cutters. This is a set from Amazon, 12 round pieces here, just all different types of sizes for, you could use a big circle, then a little circle to cut out a little donut hole if you want to actually make a traditional donut shape. And if you don't have one of these, you can use like a cup that's made out of glass that just has thin walls. Golf size, a little bigger than a golf ball, maybe twice the size of a golf ball. That's according to your preference. And just kind of shape them into like a little free-form disc. Traditionally in Portugal, it's almost always just served with granulated sugar, tossed in granulated sugar, the way you would see a sugar-coated donut in the US. Except in Hawaii, quite often they'll fill them with different custards or flavorings. So now they're cut in our final shape, or shaped as fritters. They'll proof for about anywhere from an hour to as much as 3 hours until they're about double in size. Then you just could fry them right in the oil. Donuts have been proofing for about 2 hours. We're going to fry them. You want your oil to be around 350 degrees. It should take about a minute on each side. It's important to have a thermometer to make sure your oil is about that temperature. You want to be gentle when you're putting it in the oil because these are nice and fluffy. You don't want to deflate them. I do recommend using a timer. I've been using Siri to make sure that I do about a minute on each side. Set a timer for 1 minute. Okay. You can see there's a piece there. They're absolutely delicious. I already cut into one. Slightly gooey in the middle, but just absolutely delicious. Really fluffy. The crumb is very fine. Came out great. Go ahead and practice. Eat a few. You just don't want to overcook them. They'll get too dark, and also they won't have that slight gooey texture in the middle. If you want to stuff these with filling, the technique is using something like a chopstick, poking a hole in it, and you're almost doing like a lobotomy on the malasada, just kind of working a little cavity in there. And then with a pastry brush, they do make filling tips. If you don't have that, you should be able to just use a regular straight tip and just squeeze in some custard, pudding, or even like a strawberry preserves in there. Granulated sugar mixture. Hey, I wish you were here. This is absolutely delicious. They smell incredible with that nutmeg and vanilla smell coming through. So enjoy. Now you can make malasadas from the Portuguese islands of Madeira and Azores. If you like these videos, please subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for joining me. Now go out and cook for somebody you love.